Hello, my name is Fradi Salman Mwijage from Edukea Tanzania. I'm a history teacher in advanced level. Welcome in this session. We are proceeding with our first topic, which is the rise of capitalism in Europe. The last session we ended on the contribution of mercantilism to the rise of European capitalism. So let us proceed with another step, which is the impact of mercantilism on America and the Caribbean. So let us see the impacts of mercantilism on America and the Caribbean. The first impact was related to the colonization of America and the Caribbean. During the mercantilism era, European nations were struggling to get more colonies in order to ensure there is enough areas where they will get raw materials and precious metals. So, due to the mercantilism led to the colonization of America and the Caribbean, whereby various plantations and mining centers were established in America and the Caribbean. For example, Britain had 13 colonies in America, like Canada, New Zealand, Trinidad, and the other areas. France had Mexico, Brazil had Portugal had Brazil, and Spain had Chile and Peru. So you can see how those European nations were struggling to get more colonies in order to ensure there is enough production of raw materials and precious metal for feeding their industries. Another impact related to the agricultural development. It means that during the mercantilism era, through the discovery of New World, agricultural activities were very invested in America and the Caribbean. For example, sugar plantations, sisal plantations, coffee plantations in Brazil were established. So in that sense, led to the development of agriculture sector in Caribbean and the America. That led to the increase of production in agricultural products and led to the presence of abundant raw materials or agricultural raw materials for the manufacturing of goods for commercial purpose. Hence, there is another impact of mercantilism on America and the Caribbean, which is led to the population growth. During mercantilism era, in the previous lessons I told you that there were one trade which was called the triangular slave trade, which involved the 3 continents, Europe, Africa, and America. So those merchants preferred to export African laborers from Africa to America and the Caribbean in order to work for them in plantations and mining centers which were established during the mercantile period. So in that sense, those people who were transported by that time, almost from about 10 to 15 million people were transported from Africa to Caribbean and America. So you can see the population was increased, and that population acted as the source of market and the cheap labor for working in those areas. Another impact led to the creation of black domination state. It means that the Africans who were exported from Africa to America and the Caribbean, there are some areas where was high populated by black people. So that areas were called or were named as black domination states due to the overpopulation by African or black African people. For example, in Trinidad, Mexico, Brazil, these were the areas where Africans were mostly populated. So was another impact of mercantilism on those areas. Another, it led to the growth of towns. It led to the growth of towns. Mercantilism period, as various activities were taking place in America and the Caribbean, there were emerging towns which were grown due to that practice. For example, New York City was a result of mercantilism. So you can see how mercantilism led to the rise of towns in America and the Caribbean. Another, it led to the development of industries. It means mercantilism or mercantile period led to the rise or development of industries, whereby various industries were established due to the presence of abundant raw materials and metals like gold, silver, iron, coal. So those all raw materials supported to establish and introduce various industries to ensure there is high production of goods. In that sense, those goods which were produced led to the accumulation of capital, and that led to the and that capital which were produced or accumulated by those merchants led to the development of capitalism in America and Caribbean. Another impact, it led to the spread of Christianity. It means that another impact which was occurred by that time, it led to the spread of Christianity religion. As we know, most of European nations are Christian. So those European nations which shifted from their homelands and they decided to invest in America and the Caribbean went with their religion beliefs, which is Christian or Christianity. So after reaching those places, they emphasized the native people to copy and go with and the end with Christianity belief. So thus pronounced the spread of Christianity in America and the Caribbean. After looking at the impacts of mercantilism on America and the Caribbean, let us see the impact of mercantilism in Africa. Those impacts are categorized into three parts, which the first one is economic, the second political, and the last one is social effects. Let us start with economic effect. The first effect, it led to the exploitation of African resources. It means mercantilism era led to the exploitation of African resources, and it was extensive exploitation. In which sense? During the mercantilism, those merchants were accumulating those bullions, gold and silver, which were in high need in European nations. So you can see those precious metals, slaves, animal skins, ivory were highly exploited by those European nations. So Africa was affected in that way. But another economic effect, it led to the introduction of new crops. Mercantilism era necessitated to the introduction of new crops like maize, cassava, sugarcane, and others, which was the result of mercantilism in Africa. Another economic effect was the decline of African trading system. Due to the mercantilism, those merchants came up with their trading system and led to the local trading system of Africa to collapse. For example, the barter trade system was collapsed and the merchants introduced the money system, whereby money was used as a medium of exchange to buy goods. So in that sense, African trading system was collapsed. For example, transatlantic trade was collapsed and replaced by transatlantic slave trade. So you can see how the mercantilism led to the decline of African trading system. Another effect, it led to the technological stagnation. In which way? Those merchants discouraged any African to invest in technology because they thought that if they will leave Africans to invest in technology, they will no longer need the Europeans' products. So they chop off their hands and make them disabled to produce anything, especially in technological goods. So the Africans remained stagnant in terms of technology as the result of mercantilism. Let us see another effect, which is political effects. The first one, it is paved the way for colonization of Africa. As we know, colonization is a process of strong nation to colonize the weaker nation. So those European nations were colonized Africa. What was their aim to colonize Africa? They came in Africa to search for raw materials and cheap labor, which will help them in accumulation and maximization of profit, ensuring that their nations are coming to be superpower or stable in their economies. Another political effect, it led to the rise of some African states. This is only positive impact in some African parts. It means that it led to the rise of some African states. For example, Oyo and Benin. There is another state which is Dahomey. So these were states which were lost during the mercantile era. And this is the factor for the rise of those states, it's because their rulers were involved themselves in slave trade. So in one way or another, they will get wealth from those merchants. That's why they accumulated a lot of wealth and led to make their states to become strong. Apart from political effects that led by mercantilism in Africa, there is another social effects. The first one, it led to the spread of diseases. Mercantilism pronounced the spread of diseases in Africa like smallpox, malaria, typhoid, cholera, syphilis, and other diseases. So you can see how they affected Africans. They experienced the various diseases which affected them in earth. So this was the result of mercantilism. Another one, or another social effect, it led to the depression. As I have told you that mercantilism period insisted on the exportation of slaves from Africa to Caribbean and America. So you can see how many Africans were exported or transported from Africa to Caribbean and America to work in the plantations and mining centers. So those Africans, almost about 10 up to 15 million people, as estimated by the historians, that Africans were transported to America and the Caribbean. So it led to the depopulation in Africa and the increase of population in America and the Caribbean. Another effect, it is the family separation. In which way family separation was led by mercantilism? It led to family separation as another effect of social aspect. So those relatives were taken from their families those relatives were taken as slaves from their families and go there to work in the Mexicans plantations and mining centers. So their families, relatives were separated from other members. So that was among of the social effects. Another is related to the rise of fear and insecurity. Those Mexicans were forcing those slaves or African people to be transported and work in their plantations and mining center in America and the Caribbean. So it's pronounced fear and insecurity among Africans. So it was another social effect. Another is related to deculturalization. The coming of Mexicans or European Mexicans in Africa led to the establishment of European culture in Africa. So in one way or another affected the African culture, and those Africans started to copy and imitate the Western culture that led to the decaying of African culture, like wearing style, the way of eating, and the way of believing as they come up with Christianity. And another one is related to the spread of Christianity. Those European Mexicans come up with their religion, which is Christianity. So the local religion which Africans had were discarded, and the introduction of Christianity was pronounced in Africa. So those believers who were believing in many gods or local gods by Africans were discarded by those Mexicans, hence the spread of Christianity. After looking at those impacts of mercantilism in Africa, let us continue with the third subtopic, which is Africans' contribution to the development of capitalism in Europe and America. This is our third subtopic in our topic. It is traced through trans-slave trade, triangular slave trade from 15th century. It means this African contribution to the development of capitalism in Europe and America, it is traced from triangular or transatlantic slave trade that was done during 15th century. It marked the largest migration in history, about 10 to 15 million people estimated to be exported to America and the Caribbean. So you can see that how transatlantic slave trade led to the massive exportation of African people to America and Europe. What are the conditions that make European Mexicans to recruit African slaves to America and the Caribbean? These are conditions. The first one, it is cheapness of African slaves. It means that the African slaves were cheap. They needed low wages. So for those European Mexicans decided to capture African slaves to work for their activities in their plantations and the mining centers. Another condition was weakness of Red Indies. Those Red Indies were the native people who were living in America. So those Red Indies were weak and were suffering from or were affected much by the diseases. So they could not work for a long period of time. So due to that factors led to the Mexicans to decide in coming Africa and find those Africans who were strong and energetic and they can do at a long hours. Another condition was accessibility of Atlantic African coast to Europe and America. It means Atlantic African coast was nearest to Europe and America. So it made the European Americans to see the simplification to come in Africa and capture African slaves and taking them to work on their plantations and the mining center as well as industries. Another one, it is the discovery of New World. The discovery of New World by Christopher Columbus in 1492 marked the massive capturing of slaves from Africa to America and the Caribbean, because those European Americans had little laborers who could work for them in their plantations and the mining centers. So they decided to come in Africa and capture those slaves to work in their plantations, which were established in New World. Another condition, it is development of marine technology. By that time, the marine technology was constant and stable. So the ships, vessels, and the canoes were used to transport those slaves from Africa to America and the Caribbean, even in Europe. So you can see how marine technology conditioned the European Americans to capture slaves from Africa to America and the Caribbean. The last one, it is establishment of more plantations in the New World. The establishment of more plantations in the New World really was a condition that made European Americans to capture slaves from Africa to America and the Caribbean. And those plantations included the sugar plantations, sisal plantations, and the tea plantations, which were established in America after being discovered by Christopher Columbus. And that man invited his mother countries or fellow European countries come and invest in various economic projects like agricultural plantations and mining centers as well as industries. So you can see how those conditions forced those European Americans to capture slaves from Africa to America and the Caribbean. So let me give you one question here as an exercise. Explain the driving force for European Americans to capture African slaves to America and the Caribbean. This is an important question, and it is possible question which occur in most NECTA questions. Okay, thank you for watching me. Let us meet on the next session. Thank you.
Purchase your tracks.